Hey y'all, welcome back to my channel. I'm Beth. Today we're going to do a half-year flip through of my 2024 reading journal. I know there's a lot of people that don't necessarily watch the reading wrap-ups and that sort of thing, but they do like to see flip throughs. So we're going to go ahead and do that today. This is my 2024 reading journal. I do prefer the traveler size for my reading journal. I started doing this 2 years ago. This is my third traveler size reading journal. I also like to have some sort of a theme. This particular journal came from Archer and Olive in the fall collection of maybe 2022 ? Maybe 2023 ? I don't know which one it was, but I knew immediately when they launched it that I was going to use it for a reading journal 1 year. I bought it as soon as I saw it. I am an Archer and Olive affiliate. My affiliate code is Beyond10, BEYOND10. It has changed since I changed my channel name, so Beyond10 for Archer and Olive. Save yourself 10% on anything you want to pick up over on their website. So here is my reading journal. My theme for this year is Grimm's Fairy Tales. This is what my cover page looks like. I have a card in here for each one of the stories that we are reading this year. I choose a story every month and we're alternating between well-known stories and not so well-known stories. January was Sleeping Beauty. February was The Wedding of Mrs. Fox. You know, stories most people haven't necessarily heard of unless they're very familiar with the fairy tales. Right now in July, we are on Rapunzel, and the back of this card is just decorated. This is also a library card that came in the quarterly subscription box last year. Was it August? Did it fall in the quarter or June? That had books and library theme to it, and I really like these cards with Archer and Olive. I do keep my index by title of book. I drop off things like A and the so that they're, are not all falling under A. Last year, I just had maybe 4 pages for my index, but it wasn't quite enough. As you can see, I've read a lot of books that start with A this year. I've almost run out of A spaces. I decided this year, because I have another traveler's notebook that I had started as a work journal for a job that I was not in for very long. I left it very quickly. I poached some pages out of it so that I could make foldouts and make my index a little bit longer and have a little bit more space. We have A, B, C, D. This year I decided I would do the alphabet challenge and just see if I could get a book from each letter of the alphabet. It's not a hardcore challenge for me. It's more of a curiosity to see if this happens or how close I get kind of thing. That's what these dots are that I've checked off. You can see a lot of them are still empty, but they do go all the way through the alphabet, and then I also have a spot for books that start with a number instead of a letter. I do have some goals. It's a leap year. There's 366 days in this year, so I want to read something every day of the year. 10 books from my physical backlist. I'll show you that page in a second. 3 memoirs, of which I have read 1, Judi Dench's Shakespeare, the Man Who Paid the Rent, which is at the top of my 5-star reads so far. 6 classics. As of June 30th, did not have a classic in here. As of July 13th, when filming this, I have 1.5. You'll have to stay tuned for the end of year flip through to see if I get all 6 of my classics for the year or if I fall short. We'll have to see. And then 54 in 2024. It seemed like a good number. I do have a lot going on. I don't read as much as I used to. I try to keep it realistic for me, and I don't shoot for 100 books a year or any of that sort of thing. I'm not on pace. I'm about 3 books behind to get back on pace, so we'll see if I get there by the end of the year. This is that physical backlist. So this is books that are on my bookshelves in a physical format that I've not read, and this isn't all of them. This is just a random sampling. Every year, some of them have appeared on here from year to year, and others pop up on here because I bought the book in the last calendar year and have thrown it into the mix as well. I put a little half moon shape under each one. So Bookshop of Yesterdays, I finally picked up. I DNF'd it. It was terrible. The Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah, I have read, and it was good. It was not great. It was good. I'm currently reading Nettle and Bone. We're halfway through the year, and I've only picked up 3 of them. I'm not good at it, but it's here to encourage me to do the thing. Oh, the other thing about this, somebody asked, because these book covers are so tiny, if I would consider publishing a list. On my website, I have recreated this. If you want to go check them out, it's bethandbeyond.org. I'll link it down below if you want to go look at the post about my backlist. This is my series tracker, and it's not every series I've ever read ever. This is just the ones that are currently in progress, including Realm of the Elderlings. This is the Murderbot Diaries by Martha Wells, which I've blown through over the course of June and July. I'm done with it now. I just can't find this color gray marker. I'm not sure which it is. This is where I should have made a little note somewhere what color marker this was. I do need to come in and fill this in, but these are ones that are in progress, along with Realm of the Elderlings by Robin Hobb, which I've never read before. I have now finished the first trilogy, so I'm done with Assassin's Apprentice, Royal Assassin, and Assassin's Quest. This is my book haul page, and most of my books are on here. I don't think all of the audiobooks that I've purchased are on here. Even then, I only put the ones that I have to use an Audible credit for, or if I actually buy. If they're already in the Audible catalog and complimentary to the subscription, I don't write those in here. I just did a book haul from my local library and their library sale from here to here. They all say July 12th, July 12th, July 12th. I bought 12 books at the library sale. And it's turning out that 2 pages is good for me. 1 full spread. Last year I just had the 1 and ran out of space. This is the release radar of books that I'm looking forward to. If I've actually purchased them, then they have a little check mark next to them. So Map of the Otherlands, I've purchased. I haven't read it yet. I haven't even finished Emily Wilde's Encyclopedia of Fairies. What Feasts at Night, I really want to read it, but I'm saving it for spooky season. The Book of Doors, I purchased and was very disappointed by. The Man Who Pays the Rent. I'm afraid you've got dragons. I did buy this. It's by the same author of The Last Unicorn, Peter S. Beagle, but I gave it to my ex-husband for his birthday. I didn't keep it. I didn't even read it. I just gave it to him. Peter S. Beagle is one of his favorites. His favorite book from childhood was The Last Unicorn. He was born in the year of the dragon in the Chinese zodiac and has this wild dragon obsession. And so I bought this and gave it to him for his birthday. I haven't really added anything to this. I have a page for a 2025 to be released as well. It's at the back of the book. I haven't added anything to it either. I need to look and see what's coming out this fall and see if there's anything that I'm really interested in. This is my DNF list so far. Bookshop of Yesterdays I DNF'd because it was terrible. The Happiness Trap is nonfiction. I DNF'd it because it was not the right book for me at the right time in the mental headspace that I was currently in. Has nothing to do with whether it's a good book, bad book. It just wasn't the right book at the right time. Because we're doing a Grimm read-along, I thought it would be interesting for me to rewatch the television show. I am so far behind. I had separated it out by 3 episodes a weekend. So like January 6th and 7th, I was going to watch season 1, episodes 1, 2, and 3. January 13th and 14th, following weekend. 3 episodes in 2 days, super easy to do if you're not hyper fixated on other things. And I came into 2024 hyper fixated on rewatching all of the Stargates, every iteration of the Stargate ever. And I did. I was sick at one point in May, and I took off a week at one point in June, and I did some catching up, but I haven't caught up completely. What weekend are we on? We are on this weekend right here, so I should be on season 4, episodes 10, 11, and 12. I'm not. I'm back here on season 2. It only goes through November 16th and 17th. Even if you don't celebrate American Thanksgiving or Christmas, there are so many world holidays and celebrations that take place from mid-November to the end of the year. And so I cut this off right before Thanksgiving weekend, and then this says catch-up time. So we'll see. We'll see if I make it through Grimm. I'm not loving it as much as I did the first time around, and I don't know why that is. It could just be my mood. I haven't been loving a whole lot lately. It could just be my mood. All right, this is where I put 5-star faves to do a book bracket, but I don't have any rules around it other than the fact that I only do 8. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. And then they have to battle it out and battle it out. I don't do one per month because I'm terrified that I'm going to have a really great reading month and I won't be able to put something on here. For example, while I have put Shakespeare the Man Who Pays the Rent on here, I'm probably going to end up adding the first Murderbot as well because I just love that series. I blew through it so fast and it only makes sense to put the first one on here as the beginning of my Murderbot Diaries obsession, and I read those in the same month. So if I picked only one per month and did 12, I would not be able to pick that book along with this book. I don't like that idea. But I also only stick them in here when I am 100% sure. And this book skyrocketed to the top of my 5-star reads for the year. So we've already stuck it in there. This is my reading system. It's read the entire book if you're going to rate it. Don't compare it to other reads. Trust your gut. It's not a popularity contest. For example, one of the books that was in my top reads and was on my bracket for last year and almost made it to the top was If We Were Villains by M.L. Rio, which somebody on my Patreon asked me about this week if I'd read it, and I liked it. I talked about how much I loved it and how pretentious it was and how I loved how pretentious it was. But it's still not a perfect book. None of the surprises were really surprising. They were telegraphed. I saw them coming a mile away. I can appreciate its faults and still make it a 5-star book because I love it. Would I recommend the book for a friend? How did the book make me feel? Was I engaged with the characters? Would I reread it? That's a big tell on whether it's a 5-star read for me. And then I put in here 5 stars, it's a favorite, and that may not mean it has the best writing. Clarify that. 4 stars, what a great book, you should check it out. 3 stars is a good book, but it could be better. I liked it. A good example of that recent one is The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. I gave it 3 stars. 2 stars is it's readable, but it isn't for me or needs some tightening in areas. And then 1 star is, well, I didn't DNF it. I don't recommend it, but I also don't find it offensive. If I find a book offensive in some way, shape, or form, I typically DNF it. I'm reading a classic right now that I'm having some struggles with. And I think 30 years ago, when I probably read it last, I wasn't maybe as aware of certain things or have as many feelings about certain things as I do now, and didn't find it quite. There's some things that are offensive in it, and we'll talk about it in my July reading wrap up. Recommendations. This is a fear of missing out page, for lack of a better term. The Will of the Many right now is top of my recommendations. I haven't written any others in, so if you have any books that you have read this year that you really think I might enjoy, leave them down in the comments below. And then I also have another library card here for my Book of the Month picks. And I currently have Book of the Month paused. So I skipped January. I got The Heartless Hunter in February. I skipped March. I got A Short Walk Through a Wide World in April on audio. I got The Familiar on audio in May. And then I've been paused for a little while. I have a lot of the Book of the Month books that I was getting in physical format that I just haven't read yet. And I just decided it was time to pause for a little bit. And then we move into January. And January, my Grimm read was Sleeping Beauty. At this point in the time, I was listing what I was reading here, and then I kind of had a calendar to help me remember what I started on what day and in what format. Then it fell by the wayside. I didn't keep it. I do have tabs in here Once I set up a month, I do put in a tab. And then here are my reads. So I typically put in the book cover. I have my rating. I have some metadata. I'm probably going to change some of this in 2025 because I don't think I necessarily, if the book cover always has the name and the title on it and it's redundant to also put it here, I don't know. We'll see. Here are some of my favorite quotes from the book, and then here is what I thought about the book. And here in this one, I actually put the dates that I read it, which is smart. I should go back to doing that. I don't think I've done that for my recent reads. The second book that I read in 2024 was Age of War by Michael J. Sullivan. I started Michael J. Sullivan last year with reading Theft of Swords, which had been on my shelf for eons, and then just started blowing through everything. So I came into 2024 coming through the Legends of the First Empire series and finishing that off. This is The Grief Tower by Lauren Wells. It's very niche. It's a practical guide to processing grief with third culture kids. I am a third culture kid. I am an American that was raised in Kenya. Missionary kids, military kids, embassy brats. It's much more common now than it was when I was raised. Those were the 3 categories of third culture kids. And that goes either direction. You could be born in Hong Kong and raised in Paris. You could be born in Cape Town and raised in Cairo. It's being raised in a culture not the one that you were born into. And it comes with its own certain challenges. The Grief Tower talks about the amount of tiny grief moments in our lives that we had to tuck away. For me, was growing up in Kenya great? Yes. Did it have some challenges? Sure. But it was the number of times friends come in and out of your life because one day they're there and the next day they're not. Specifically for military kids, it's very common for them to suddenly realize that their best friend from across the street is gone now because transfers happen so quickly. And we cover up those grief moments because of various reasons. And we let this grief tower stack and stack and stack and stack and stack and stack. And I really had an idealistic view of my childhood, and I had not faced some of these things and really paid attention to examples of some of these things. And after I read this book, I started looking back at my childhood, and it's not like it tainted my childhood, but it opened my eyes to some things that I needed to face and that I needed to start talking about with my therapist. It's really what it did. It's short, it's concise, it's really written for maybe people who are currently in that position, and it's got some coping mechanisms to help them with their kids, to tell them that it's okay to have these feelings and all of that sort of thing. But it's also helpful as an adult third culture kid to go back and reevaluate a little bit of your childhood. Continuing again with Legends of the First Empire. February, I still had the calendar in February. Our read was The Wedding of Mrs. Fox. Here's the 2 books that I DNF'd. Yeah, so there we go. Continuing with Legends of the First Empire. Finishing Legends of the First Empire? Question mark. Finally. Yeah. And then probably my most disappointing read of the year was The Book of Doors by Gareth Brown, because it was one of my most anticipated reads, and I gave it a 2.5. It did not work for me. The writing didn't work for me. I don't feel like this person should write female characters at all. There were some issues that I had with it. Obviously, Snow White was our read for March. I took out the calendar down here and I put in notes from Snow White instead. Stardust Thief by Chelsea Abdullah, which I enjoyed. Again, I was a little disappointed with it, but mostly I enjoyed it. The Boy on the Bridge by M.R. Carey. I didn't love it quite as much as the first book, The Girl with the Gifts. I kept thinking I was going to come write something in here, but I didn't. Moving on to April, and this is the Bremen Town Musicians. and the beginning of my sci-fi era. So I am reading other things, but I'm also reading a lot of science fiction this year. It started this time around. Well, it started with, hang on, let me back up. It started with Long Way to a Small Angry Planet, which I actually started at the end of 2023, but it lived in my purse and I was only reading it at doctor's offices and I was going so slowly. I just wasn't sitting down and reading it, but I was very much enjoying it. And then I decided to listen to Project Hail Mary by Andy Weir, which 5-star read for sure. Absolutely loved it. He's also the author of The Martian, but this is one of those ones that had awards for the audiobook, and that's one of the reasons I chose the audiobook, and I think that's definitely the way to go with this read. I loved every minute of it, but it really kick-started my sci-fi era, because then as soon as I finished it, I wanted to finish A Long Way to a Small Angry Planet. So I finally finished it and then immediately read the second book in that series, A Closed and Common Orbit, and got that out of the way, and then went into May and decided to jump back into some fantasy and picked up Royal Assassin by Robin Hobb so I could finish that first trilogy in the Robin Hobb universe and that whole and Assassin's Quest. And yeah, sometimes I write notes, sometimes I don't. Sometimes I just put in my favorite quotes. One of the Bullet Journal Book Club picks, Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte. I like Tiago. I watch his videos because I'm a fan and I already watch his videos and I already read his blog and I already get his content. The book felt redundant for me. It's good if you've never explored the methodologies around keeping a digital brain. It's definitely something worth reading, but when you're already in the world of the creator and understand their motives behind what they do and have been watching videos on how to accomplish this thing and organize this thing and do this thing or that thing, and it felt just a little redundant for me. May is where I started, again in my sci-fi era, reading novellas, and so I had been leaving gaps when I put my dots in for what I was reading for the year, and it got a little crowded. We also read The White Snake, a really unusual story from the Grimm brothers about taking a bite out of a snake and then being able to hear what animals are saying to one another and understand them. And then, of course, I read Judi Dench, The Man Who Pays the Rent. 5-star read. Hardcore. Yes, I'm a Shakespeare nerd. You probably need to know a little bit of Shakespeare before you read it. I would definitely recommend the audiobook because this started off as a series of interviews between Judi Dench and Brendan O'Hay. And so you really need to have the interview style. So the audiobook all the way on this one. Again, The Familiar by Leigh Bardugo. Like I said, this was, it was fine. It was a 3-star read for me. The Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo, still sticking with me. I've left this one at a 4, and I keep trying to decide if I'm going to bump it up to a 4.5 or a 5. And I just don't know yet. Sometimes the book lingers with you when you really didn't expect it to, and that has been the case of Seven Husbands of Evelyn Hugo. And there we go. All Systems Red. This is the first Martha Wells. I love it. I just love it. The Murderbot Diaries. If you don't like humor in your science fiction or your fantasy, then this is not for you. On the other hand, if you enjoy the humor of, say, Terry Pratchett, this is probably for you. And yeah, I had the best time over June and July with Murderbot. So there's Artificial Condition, Rogue Protocol, and Exit Strategy. And that takes us into the beginning of July. Now, at the back of my reading journal, I do also have this TBR for 2025. So if I see that any books are coming out next year that I'm interested in, and then I also have my Read 366 challenge. I had originally stamped 365 before I realized it was a leap year and that I needed to add a day, so that's corrected just a little bit. And that is my reading journal, but what I do have to go along with this And it was something that I used to keep in previous iterations of my journal. And then I decided that I wanted them. This is my Grimm fairy tale book, by the way. And then I decided that I wanted them in a collection all their own because it's something that I'm pretty passionate about. And that is the first lines of books. And so I moved my first lines collection into this journal, and I gave it a header page for 2024. I'll make another header page, for whatever we move on to next. And see, I don't format them. I don't make them look pretty. I just write in the first lines of whatever I'm reading. I've made it through Rogue Protocol by Martha Wells. So there's some of the other Murderbots that I need to come put in here. I also need to put in here what I've started reading for July. But yeah, so these are just the first lines of all of the books that I have read for the year. And like I said, when I get to the end of the year, we're still going to be in the same journal, and I'll create a new header page to match whatever my theme is for the year. So that is it. That is what my reading journals look like for 2024. My regular reading journal, my first lines journal. Clearly, I'm in my sci-fi era, so if there are any great sci-fi books you think that I need to read, let me know down in the comments below. Thank you so much for watching this video. If you liked it, please give it a big thumbs up. Subscribe if you haven't already, and I will catch you in the next one.